In this video, we're going to be talking about the visibility options in CodyFrame. Now, I'm not referring to the visibility CSS property utility classes, as in, for example, visibility hidden. I'm talking about showing and hiding elements when certain conditions are met. Let's start from display and hide utility classes. So we have this example here, which is just a list of buttons. Now let me distribute these elements real quick using the flex utility classes. Okay. Now let's imagine that we want to hide the first element, and we want to show it past a specific breakpoint, the X small breakpoint. Now, other frameworks, they do something like that. They hide the element first with a utility class, and then they set a specific display value, for example, inline flex. And then they target a breakpoint, like, for example, small. Now, CodyFrame works in a different way. So we tried to simplify things, and to show this element past the small breakpoint, you only have to write display at small. Okay, when you use the display at breakpoint utility classes, now let me show you first of all that it's working, and as you can see, the element 1 is not showed until the small breakpoint. So when you use one of these display at breakpoint utility classes, we take for granted that the element needs to be hidden before that breakpoint. So we hide it. And then past the small breakpoint, the element is made visible, even though we don't really set a specific display value. So let me show you how this is working. If you check our documentation, we have this little explanation. So we use the not logic, which means that we don't really set a display value at the breakpoint. We just set the display none before that breakpoint, which means that the element you are targeting can really have any kind of display value. This is not going to conflict with the display utility classes. So in a way, it's like we don't really care about the display value. You can set a display value using another utility class, or maybe you can set this value in CSS. We just want to make sure that the element is not going to be visible until the small breakpoint. Now, we also have the hide utility classes. So for example, we have made this element hidden until the small breakpoint. Now let's say we want to hide it past the large breakpoint. So let me comment this out real quick. Okay, so we have the element 1, which is no longer visible. But as you can see, it's hidden by default. Then it becomes visible past the small breakpoint, and at the large breakpoint, it's hidden again. So this is how the display and hide utility classes work. Now you can't display the element again after using one of the hide utility classes, which will mean hiding an element, then displaying an element, then hiding it again. At that point, you cannot really display the element again. It's not going to work with our utility classes. It would also be really a strange behavior. Anyway, let me remove the hide. Obviously, you have utility classes for all the breakpoint. For example, let's set XS, medium, large, and X large. And now, as you would expect, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so this is how the display hide utility classes work. Next, we have the isVisible, isHidden classes. So these classes are generally triggered by an event. So they are toggled using JavaScript. And once again, we don't set a display value. Let me show you an example. So let's say we have a component that by default is hidden. Now, when a specific event occurs, we want to change the display property to, for example, block. So we use something like, I don't know, maybe block, okay? So display block. So in JavaScript, we add this class block to the element to make it visible, okay? Now let's assume that we want to change the display property of this element when it becomes visible. We want this property to be something different. So we want this property to be flex. So now you have to change your JavaScript to account for the new display value, which is flex. So now you have to add this class instead. So we wanted to do something different. So that in JavaScript you can always use the isVisible class. Now the isVisible class is going to apply a display value equal to a variable which is display. So when you're working at first with your element in CSS, you can set the desired display value using this custom property. In this case, for example, if you want to change from block to flex, you can just change this value here from block to flex. And the isVisible class is always going to be the one added using JavaScript, and it will always work. Okay, now finally we have the Node.js and the print utility classes. So Node.js is the Node.js is hidden class, which means that something is hidden if JavaScript is disabled. Now let me see where we have actually used this class. Right, so the accordion component. So if we check the accordion component on CodyHouse, accordion, right, so it makes sense. So we have these arrows in here. But what's going to happen if JavaScript is disabled? Let me disable JavaScript and refresh. Now, for the accordion component, if JavaScript is disabled, you cannot really control the accordion panel's visibility using these buttons over here. So we decided to have the panels expanded by default when JavaScript is disabled. And if that happens, it doesn't make any sense to have the arrows. So we use the Node.js is hidden class on the arrows so that they are not visible if JavaScript is disabled. Now a similar concept is the one of the print is hidden utility class. So you can use this class if you want to hide something when the user is printing the page. For example, in most cases, you may want to hide the header with all the navigation information. So you may want to add the footer, for example. Anyway, you can decide which elements need to be hidden when the user is printing your page, and you can do so using this utility class. Okay, now you know all about the visibility options in CodyFrame, and thanks for watching.